Real Talk. My name is Anthony Cherry. I'm an educator, historian, consultant, and writer here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm also proud to be a member of Tri-City Collective and the project director for Real Talk, Voices on the Margin. Real Talk, Voices on the Margin is a series of curated live conversations on issues and topics of critical importance to marginalized communities, including, but not limited to, people of color, LGBTQAI+, and economically disadvantaged citizens. Providing a voice and a platform for often voiceless people is at the heart of this series. Real Talk, Voices on the Margins, is a partnership with Pursuit Films, OK Humanities, and Tri-City Collective. At this time, Pursuit Films and Tri-City Collective respectfully acknowledges the land on which we gather as the traditional territory of the Muskogee Creek Nation. Their honor, resilience, and sacrifices continue to inspire our spirit and inform our work. We also acknowledge the Black Americans who lost life, property, and generational wealth in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Their honor and blood inform our spirit and our work. I'd like to introduce our guest now. Jeremy Kuzmarov holds a PhD in American history from Brandeis University and has taught at colleges across the United States, including Tulsa Community College. He is managing editor of Covert Action Magazine and hosts a podcast on WBAI Radio and the Progressive Radio Network called Left on Left. He is author of 5 books on U.S. foreign policy, including the most recently, Warmonger, How Clinton's malign foreign policy shaped the U.S. trajectory from Bush II to Biden. He has published dozens of articles in popular media and academic journals and anthologies. Thank you for being here, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me.
Next to Jeremy is Julius Fellows. Julius is a licensed professional counselor who resides in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Julius has over 15 years in trauma-informed care and mental health healing strategies, especially within the African American communities. Julius practices eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, also known as EMDR. He is also a consultant and developer of behavior programs for daycare centers where he teaches children emotional intelligence. Julius is a father of 2 girls, ages 14 and 20, and sees the role of fatherhood as one of his greatest accomplishments. He is a follower of Christ and credits God in helping him discover his purpose for healing people. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Next to Julius is Milton Dean III. Milton is a math instructor at the nonprofit therapeutic alternative site, Street School. With over a decade of experience in the classroom, he serves as a Tulsa Classroom Teacher Association building delegate and a National Education Association ambassador on the local and national level. Outside the classroom, he serves as a deacon at New Jerusalem Baptist Church. That's the church I went to as a kid, where he also teaches Sunday school. He has passion for helping young people, which led him to work with the Tulsa Higher Education Consortium to assist students with post-secondary aspirations. He has been married to his wife, Markeisha, for 19 years. Together, they have 2 sons, 19 and 13, Javon and Savion. He has a passion for the community and believes that supporting success is the only way we can overcome barriers for equity and achieve economic mobility. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Next to Milton is Bracken Clark. Bracken works and teaches all aspects of pre-production, production, and post-production. This includes researching, interviewing, script editing, voice coaching, using Adobe Audition, Logic Pro, Descript, and many more to record, edit, and engineer sound and vocals for both the final broadcast and podcast versions. He has worked with Solutions Journalism Network and the New York Times serial podcast, the BBC, and others. In addition to his EP role, he has interviewed candidates running for state and federal offices and reported on local decarceration efforts, Project Commutation, among other subjects. As an author and researcher, Bracken has contributed to both nonfiction and fiction pieces and provided research for many books, articles, and other publications. In addition to his awards won, his work has also helped win an Emmy and was shortlisted for a Peabody. Thank you for being with us, Bracken.
Thank you for having me.
Well, to start the conversation, I just want to, let our audience know exactly what we're talking about today. Well, I'm going to read the blurb for our topic. Is Tulsa failing its most vulnerable youth? This dynamic panel unites fearless journalists exposing hidden truths, dedicated educators witnessing the impact firsthand, and leading mental health experts, all committed to dissecting the harsh reality faced by Tulsa's youth in our juvenile detention centers. We will delve into the untold stories, break the cycle of injustice, explore actionable solutions for reform and rehabilitation, and emphasize the critical role of trauma-informed mental health care. Don't just witness this crisis. You can actively participate in forging a better future with the guidance of these people on the panel. This is your opportunity to engage directly with experts, ask challenging questions, and demand a just system for our children. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Let's begin with a few questions. This is a question for everyone. And we'll start with Jeremy, and then we'll go this way towards Bracken. Could you share a brief personal story, experience, or a specific example that illustrates why you feel so strongly about the issues we are discussing today and the broader scheme of your work?
I was covering the case of Markel Ross, who was a youth here in Tulsa who was a great basketball player, and a friend of his picked him up one day, and it turned out that the car, he was just walking down the street, and it turned out that the car was stolen, although he didn't know that. And unfortunately, when they were at a gas station, the person who stole the car ran away, so he got caught. Now, he should have got probation, but somehow the judge, threw the book at him and gave him a 2-year prison sentence. And then inexplicably, he was put in McAllister prison, which is a state penitentiary with hardened criminals. And tragically, he was murdered in prison, and the murder was covered up by the Department of Corrections. And in fact, the murder occurred after, for an inexplicable reason, he was kept in prison past his release date. And then his family was not told he was murdered until a week later, and the circumstances have been covered up. So, I'm a freelance journalist, so I covered this case because I went to a hearing in Oklahoma City at the state capitol that was put on by Justin Humphrey, who's a Republican congressman, state legislature, who's heading the state capitol's committee on criminal justice. And he had a whole day hearing on abuses in the prison system in Oklahoma, and this was the start of the hearing. He spotlighted this case, and he had a few members of his family there who I interviewed after. And this is just a shocking example of abuses within the local criminal justice system, and how one youth was totally mistreated, and unfortunately not with us anymore. And there was a whole day hearing. This was, although a shocking case, but unfortunately there are other cases of people who are unjustly incarcerated, and often it is Black youth are targeted. The police think they're criminals just because they're African American, and they're often put in jail for unfair reasons. And this is an extreme case where a young man was murdered. So in my career, because I was doing freelance journalism for local newspapers, and I was focused on this topic of criminal justice system, and ended up covering some of these cases. So this was the worst, but there are others I've written about. So it was a window into this problem for me.
Shocking case. It's a shocking example. And it could happen to any of us and any of our children at any time. So I think it's important that we continue this conversation. Please, Julius, can you add something?
Well, yeah, so the way I got into learning more about the criminal justice system was actually in a space of like triumph, which is kind of interesting. I worked for a program called Girl Scouts Behind Bars. And years ago, almost 5 years ago, a friend of mine was like, hey, there's this program I'm a part of. I know you're a therapist. I know what you do. You'd be great. You want to come and volunteer. So I volunteered. And so what this program does is it actually works with a prisoner or a person who is in prison. And then they basically say, hey, if you do what you're supposed to do, we'll give you an opportunity to hang out with your children once a month. And, every month that there's a holiday, we're going to let you spend some time with your children. And so he's like, why would you do that? Aren't they supposed to be getting punished? Well, I think the punishment's not supposed to be on the family. When you do that, you basically make a system where you're putting trauma onto the children. And if the children have a chance to communicate, get to touch their mothers, then the recidivism rate lowers dramatically. And when I mean dramatically, like 80, 90%. Because they're actually having this conversation. When there's things that pop up in their life, they can actually spend an hour with their mom and just talk to them about it. And their mother, coming from the place of wisdom, can say, nah, you don't want to do that because this is the situation. So what was interesting to me is I was just like, why isn't this happening everywhere? And that's when I got into the understanding of the way the system works, how hard it was for them to maintain those relationships or get those relationships. And this is a program all over the country. But if that's the case and we understand that, why isn't it happening? And what I came to the conclusion is that the system is not incentivizing change. It incentivizes people to be incarcerated. So most systems are not going to change until there's an incentive for people not going back to prison or for their children not going back to prison. And that's how I jumped into the whole thing. And I've been, passionate about it ever since.
It's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Milton, please.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. For me, a pit stop in teaching was at the Tulsa County Family Center for Juvenile Justice. I worked with the kids that were in the juvenile detention center. If you're under 18, you still need to have an education. So I teach math. And I was there trying my hardest to give kids hope, really trying to uplift them, tell them, your life is not over. It's going to be time after here. You just got to get back on track. You got to get back focused. A lot of my math lessons turned into life skills and financial literacy. I mean, I had points where I would bring in ties and help young men learn how to tie ties. I was blessed to be there, and it was a lot of things I learned from them. Some things I wanted to learn, some things I didn't want to learn. However, I enjoyed creating relationships with them. During that time, for Tulsa, we were on TV, and sometimes it's not the most flattering light, but I had students that were on First 48. Those were, my students, and I was happy to support them and help them no matter what they did. But I understood that a lot of their trauma created circumstances sometimes beyond their control, and they didn't know how to deal with it, and they didn't deal with it correctly. The saying is true. Hurt people hurt people. And it's very unfortunate that, young men of color, are in juvenile a little bit higher than others. Um, the stats are there. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I saw it for myself, and it's very unfortunate. I don't want to say a specific name right now, but a lot of kids just had my heart, and it was sad, seeing them come in, speak life into them. It seemed like they were going to be okay. They go out, and 2 months later, 3 months later, they're back. And process same after the same after the same. You would see the same kids, and it was like, okay, what next is going to happen if the kid doesn't get this under control? If a parent, a mentor, a guide doesn't help them start making a change, it's only two options. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of kids, and we see it in the news. A lot of them end up dead, and some of them end up spending life, 50 years in prison.
Yeah, you seem very invested in this, and I appreciate you sharing that story. And that cannot be easy to witness this with your own eyes. Bracken, you've also witnessed this system and how destructive it can be with your own eyes. Can you share your response, please?
Yeah, for sure. So I got my bachelor's degree in sociology, sort of a focus on urban deviance from Langston. And just through the studies we read and the books, the articles we read, so much over-incarceration exists in historically marginalized communities. Black people, brown people, LGBTQIA youth are the highest runaway rates, and they usually end up on the street and then in jail. And without the money that sort of middle class or people with more affluence have access to, lawyers, they can get out of jail immediately, go back to their lives while they're awaiting trial. Like Khalid Browder, right? Like he was kept in jail because he wasn't really accused of anything. He was arrested for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He couldn't make bail. He stayed in jail for 7 years or something, just awaiting trial. Anyway, as I became so after graduation, I started working at Shadow Mountain, which was a juvenile detention center, and it was eventually shut down by the state for continually failing audits and inspections. And I was there, and I witnessed the failure that the audits and inspections showed, and I couldn't continue working there because the focus was not on treatment, and I was not allowed to give treatment. The focus was on retaining people and extracting money from the system. I left and I started my career path towards librarianship. And my first job was at TU Law, and a bunch of the lawyers there and professors there were actively working to decarcerate, to sort of right the wrongs of the system. And I decided this is what I want to do. I want to be a librarian. I want to help. And I worked for TCCL, Tulsa City County Library, in many branches. And you see people that are either, the common conception of homelessness is the people you see every day. But a lot of homelessness you don't know, because those are the folks that come to the library, they use the computers to find jobs, they use the resources, and they get reemployed. The people that are constantly or consistently homeless are the folks with either severe drug addictions or mental health problems. But most people who experience homeless, it's for a short time, and they use the resources and get out. That's what we ran into at the library a lot, was helping people get out of homelessness and get back into more healthy situations. So I worked at a law library, I worked at a public library, and then I went to Holland Hall and started working with students there. And then from there I went to TPS, and I witnessed a lot of what you're saying, students, what we know about things like standardized tests, especially ACTs and SATs, in their histories, the only thing they've consistently reliably showed is how much money your parents make. there are exceptions, obviously, but we can rely on them for one thing particularly, to show how much money your parents make. And these tests determine futures of kids. So if kids grow up in a poverty situation, they can be as smart as they want, but their culture is different. They don't know how to take standardized tests. They don't perform well on them. The questions are not written with them in mind. And that sort of predisposes kids towards, disinterest in school, disinterest in, society at large. They've just been told and shown, and like label theory, right? Like, you've been labeled not good at school. You've been labeled a troublemaker. You've been labeled stupid. So my experience has been in juvenile detention centers, and also with people sort of on the fringes of either about to be in or have come out of prison and are looking to be to learn literacy, to learn job placement skills, to learn interview skills. And that's my experience with like my personal experience as a reporter and as the person who reads. I've read so many books and so many articles about the over-incarceration of women in Oklahoma, taking children away from women, and a lot of the women in jail are there because of horrible boyfriends. And because they're in the car or they're being abused, they also get caught up in the arrest and the prosecution of the crime. So places like, or people like Colleen McCarty and the Appleseed Project are looking to correct that. And I've worked with them. I've worked with when marijuana was legal or made available by prescription in Oklahoma, the law did not retroactively apply to people in prisons. So TU Law with students, and Stephen Galoob and Colleen McCarty had a project to go back and retroactively fight for people in jail for marijuana charges. And they won, and they kept at it for 2 years till eventually the state said, this is a good idea. We should just blanket make people who are in jail for minor marijuana offenses free. So that's sort of my experience, both personally and in my professional work.
Thank you for sharing, gentlemen. And, just for the audience's sake, can you just give us provide a little more detail about the specific nature of the work that you do, and the populations that you work with, and initiatives that you've been a part of? If you can briefly tell us that, please.
Well, in my case, I work in education as well as journalism, so I've mainly been doing investigations into particular cases or corruption in the local criminal justice system.
Trauma care, working with families and individuals that are incarcerated or have been incarcerated, because it's just a emotional trauma, cycle, and trying to do my best to help people learn how to heal themselves, because I think everyone has the ability to heal themselves. They just need the tools in order to figure out how to do that. Working with Girl Scouts Behind Bars, and then just working, even before that, like as a case manager, I came across a lot of individuals who had just been, out of the system, and just the struggles they faced, just growing, because it seems like the more you grow, there's these roadblocks. If you make too much money, they kick you out of your apartment and they raise your rent. It's like all of these different levels that you have to go through. So that's been my focus and how I've been in the system working.
Don't you have your own practice?
And I have my own practice. Yes, I have my own practice where I do EMDR. I also, like I said, I work with kids, a lot of kids, because I work with daycares, teaching the staff and also the kids how to learn what they need to learn now so that they don't have to relearn it later. Because that's the biggest thing. Like, everyone's like, oh man, it would be great if they learned it. Well, it all starts in the beginning. And if the parents don't have the tools, that's because somebody didn't give them the tools. So if we learn these things now, just like myself, I had to learn a lot of this stuff later on in life. And it's not too complicated. And it's really not complicated if you give it to a child, because a child can learn anything at a young age.
Thank you. Milton.
So currently, I do work at Street School. It's a alternative nonprofit school, 9th through 12th, teach math. Just passion for education, community, students, and seeing change within my community. I know for our topic, 4 years I spent at the juvenile detention center, it was tough. It was definitely tough. It was different after about a year and a half, and the law changed. That was the difference. They passed legislation where even if you are a youthful offender, a YO, you would be in the juvenile detention center, and those are students or kids or young people who have done adult crimes. And so, like I said earlier, I had kids from First 48 that was in my classroom. I had kids not alleged, not allegedly have took a life, but actually convicted of it. And so you treat everybody as a human being. You understand that, things happen and you want the best for them. I can remember off the top of my head, it's a sad story, but came in ready for work, listening to the radio. Oh my gosh, it's a 12-year-old young lady stabbed her 9-year-old brother to death. And it's like, okay, so that person's gonna be in my class. Are we okay with giving her a pencil? That was an honest conversation those teachers had. Like, what do we do in this situation? Because we don't know. And end up being one of the nicest young ladies of that place. It was very intent on learning, intent on getting an education, did work and wanted to know if it was correct. And you realize people have moments where if mental health, isn't addressed, consequences can be serious. And so I still carry that with me as an educator. I'm 2 years away from the juvenile detention center, and those kids, I can still see their faces, and some of them who are out and have done better, I've seen them in the community, and I'm excited. I'm proud of them, and some I've friended on Facebook. Like, it's amazing to see kids come out of juvenile and don't come back and then actually lead a productive life. I love that. I definitely love running into them and, offering words of wisdom and encouragement and letting them know how you changed my life. Because I can't just think of you as some thug or criminal that there's no hope for, because I've been there with you. I've talked to you. I've helped you. And now I can see that God still had a plan for you. And that's what it comes down to. God has a plan for everybody. Whatever route it's going to, you're taking to get there. Some of it's, less fortunate than others, but they do have a plan.
Yeah, I'm glad we've got good people like you have put your efforts into this system, but I hate what the system has done to the good people that have invested in it. Bracken, can you please tell us a little bit more about the institutions that you've worked for?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to start with a different sort of track. Like my work now is exposure with Focus Black Oklahoma and various other publications, like exposing, telling the story of what is happening in the juvenile justice system, what leads to incarceration, the two different tiers of justice. If you're rich, there's a different set of laws that apply to you than if you're poor. If you're black, there's a different set of laws that apply to you. If you're a historically marginalized community member, there's a different set of laws. So reporting on stories that show that and exposing it. Since we're on NPR's audience tends to be older, whiter, and more affluent than than the U.S. at large, right? So exposing those stories to people that might not be aware of it, that's really what I've been doing lately, and what the show is doing. We've worked with the Solutions Journalism Network, and we follow that sort of like style of a story shouldn't just be here's what happened, but also like what's the solution. So the basic format is the story, what has been tried that didn't work, and what shows promise now, and then like a call to action. Like, if you're concerned about this, what can you do as a listener to get involved and help change the injustice that is occurring within the justice system? So those stories have been, over incarceration of women, like I was talking about, like the stories everybody's been talking about, just exposing that to a wider audience, talking to politicians about like what they're doing, what their platform is, what have they done. If they're running for, re-election, like what have you been doing? You're promising this stuff now, which is great, but have you done anything in the past to like bolster this, to prove this, that you're not just saying this for the election? As far as like the places I've been, when I was at Shadow Mountain in the Juvenile Justice Center, or Juvenile Detention Center, there wasn't much, there wasn't restorative justice. It was a detention center. It was meant to like house people and like punish them for the crime. There wasn't much effort or money or staff time spent towards restorative justice, getting them prepared for the outside world, job skills, emotional intelligence skills, human relation skills. When they were 18, if they aged out, that was it. Like you open the door and they walk out, and there they are. Like there's no plan, there's no bridge. And one of the folks we're working with now, YPI, the Youth Philanthropy Initiative, their final project is, or their capstone, they've been working with this population for their entire like journey through YPI, is working with kids about to age out of the juvenile justice center or out of detention, and what can they do to bridge that gap from kids being in the juvenile center to real life. Like we as a society should not want kids to go out of juvenile justice center and right back into David L. Moss. That might be good for like, when I was at Shadow Mountain, it was owned or ran by the same folks who ran David L. Moss. So there's not like an incentive to keep them out of the dole, right? So we shouldn't want that as a society. We shouldn't want to enrich people because we're not teaching kids how to be like good citizens or job skills or emotional labor skills or whatever. So yeah, YPI is working on that, and their capstone project is awesome, great group of kids, and I really like exposing those or telling those stories to a wider audience, and hopefully showing voters what politicians have done versus what they're promising to do, and also exposing them to ideas like restorative justice. I don't think restorative justice is known by enough people. I don't want to say most, but a lot of people in Oklahoma and nationwide are concerned with punishing bad people, punishing crime, not restoring and rehabilitating to become back a full, a taxpayer, a job holder, a good parent, a good friend, a good community member. So I think exposing those and telling those stories to a wider audience is, I hope it's helpful. I hope knowledge is power. I want to believe that.
You want to add something?
Yeah, so I love what you said about restorative justice, because it's been proven statistically that punitive justice doesn't work. And it's interesting because it's all just talking points for politicians, right? We're hard on crime, right? But at the end of the day, for some reason, especially us as a society, America, we're a very individualistic society. So people don't have a problem with it until it happens to them. But if someone's dealing with this, if you take, let's say a child, give you a good example, Job Corps. I used to work at Job Corps before I was even a therapist. And, you had to actually, we got a benefit if we got them a job. If they made it through the program, the company made more money. So there goes an incentive to make sure that the child has a job. Well, if you de-incentivize somebody for actually doing the right thing, and we live in a capitalistic society, we can't expect people's morality to go against their shareholders. So just the system in itself, it's like, hey, this is something the politicians should be doing is, hey, how do we change it where it helps? Because, okay, let's say you don't care about anyone and you're up here at this tier. You care about it if one day you get robbed and one of those kids comes. I had a really, really good friend of mine years back, and it was a kid that when I was at Job Corps was there, and I guess he drove his car really fast around a corner, almost hit the kid. And I guess the kid got mad. He didn't hit him, but the kid got mad, met him up at the Quick Trip. He told the Quick Trip guy, hey, this guy's out here tripping. The guy goes and shoots my friend and another 18-year-old boy and kills him. Okay. Now, most people will be like, oh, man, that's crazy. Well, that kid had been in the system. They didn't give him his medication or things that he needed. His mother said we didn't know what to do with him, and he was just out, and he was doing his own thing. So these things as a society, if we think of it as a culture as a whole, affect everyone, but we just have to make people aware that they can't live in their silo. These are responsibilities for the society, that if we don't restore people and make them whole, then not only are you dealing with them, you're going to deal with their children. We're going to deal with all of these different issues that happen when, if it's prison, it's the most controlled environment. Why wouldn't we use the controlled environment to finally give them an opportunity to actually heal themselves? Give them every opportunity. They have nothing else to do. So why wouldn't we put all of the things in this pot? And then the people, of course, there's some people who, of course, are super violent. They have to be put aside for their safety and others. But the majority of people are not those people. They're really good people, and then they get in there, and then they have to be violent, or they become more traumatized, and then you run the system again over and over.
Yeah, Jeremy, Milton, you said you wanted to.
Yeah. I wanted to
please.
say, because you guys are making some really good points. When I was in juvenile, it was so weird to me how much red tape was there. So you would think, man, they would want this great program. This is a nonprofit that wants to come in and help these students, wants to help these kids. I mean, it could be something as simple as I want to, serve by giving haircuts. And it would be all of these questions and who they are and all of these things that I felt like, man, you come up, talk to the person, then they can come in. There were so many hoops to jump through that it's almost like they don't try. And I don't know if that's by design or, by laws, legislation, but it was so many times that I offered solutions. And after I, just telling people what I did, and where I worked, they were more than willing to help, and they wanted to. But anytime I brought it to the administration or the superintendent, it was like, okay, we'll look into it. We'll see. And I'm like, it's not even a budget thing because they're trying to do it for free. I know they had certain things that they could do, couldn't do. They ended up having like yoga. I know they had a contract and people would come in and do that. But when it comes to those life skills that you're talking about, those things that you want to work on and develop and have young men become men, it wasn't there. And I'm like, I know all of these organizations that are more than willing to help. And I just never could understand why they didn't want other people to come help and assist.
Why do you think that was?
I still don't understand it because it's to me, there's a problem with my math teacher. There got to be a solution. Let's figure this out. But a lot of people don't want solutions to these hard questions, like these hard issues. It's like we're okay with the status quo. And I'm like, that's one of the reasons I'm not there anymore.
Yeah, and you brought up an excellent point. Is this by design? And Jeremy, as a historian and a journalist, I'm sure you analyze history and society deeply. Is there anything you'd like to add about some of these societal issues that we've been talking about? Are these things that we've been dealing with before?
Well, first, related to some of the points, I would agree. The aim of the prison system should largely be a rehabilitative one. Historically, that's what it was in principle set up to do. The founding fathers of the United States did conceive of it that way, particularly those who were involved with the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, the historical pattern shows otherwise. And from the situation in Oklahoma, because the hearing I went to at the Capitol, this was in October, headed by Justin Humphrey. And I do think, although I think most of the political establishment are, either corrupt or oblivious to the situation. I think Humphrey is one good person, and he is a Republican. Most of us here, I don't think, are Republican, but I think he is doing the right thing. He was the head of the criminal justice committee for the state legislature. He's a Republican representative from Lane, and he chaired these hearings to expose abuses in the Oklahoma correctional system and how it's completely operating at odds with the principles you guys are suggesting how it should operate, and it's the exact opposite. And a lot of the Oklahoma prisons have a hellish environment, and this came out. This hearing had testimony from guards, correctional officers, and I think there are some in that field who are good professionals who try and uphold a good standard in their prison. They are being driven out, the good people, and these hearings expose the failed leadership of Kevin Stitt and his appointment of Stephen Harp to head the Bureau of Correction. He's the current director of the Bureau of Corrections, is a guy who has no background in the criminal justice field, who has, I think, an MBA degree from Harvard, and he's trying to, bring in these managerial methods, more, computerized management, but he's totally detached from the situation in these prisons, and he's putting his own people in there and removing correctional officers who may have the right approach. And this is combined with sweeping budget cuts, the kind of program they need, educational program, because in theory, the prison could be a good opportunity for some people if they can get an education while they're in prison, if they have access to counseling, substance abuse, therapy. Some people could actually, the prison experience might actually benefit them. But instead, what's happening in Oklahoma, and unfortunately this is a nationwide trend, but I think it's worse here and worse than it was before. I think there have been persistent problems in the Oklahoma system going back decades. And it was bad before, but I think this administration is especially bad, what came out in these hearings. They're cutting these programs. They're cutting their staff so that the guards feel they're in a position they can't even control the inmates. There's evidence that there's a lot of extortion rackets going on in the prisons. There are not enough guards to actually control the inmates. Some of them are violent offenders or sadistic people. They're actually running a lot of these prisons. They're bringing in contraband. They're extorting people, beating them up, forcing and they showed videos at the hearing. Videos were smuggled out where they're beating prisoners to near death, and if they're forcing them to call family members and have them give thousands of dollars to these bad people who've taken charge of the prisons. They're firing staff who are trying to do the right thing. And at the hearing featured a woman named Dr. Whitney Lewis, who is, I think, a model professional, who's a prison psychologist, who has worked at a women's prison, and she has wide experience in the prison field. And she came, she's from Oklahoma. She came back. She's somebody who's a compassionate woman who wanted to work to help inmates. And they treated her horribly. And she reported on rapes that were going on in women's prison. And then they labeled her, because she was fingering people, a cover-up in the prisons. They ostracized and then fired her, and she was actually sexually assaulted. And she was saying that the environment in these prisons is just absolutely horrific. So I think what we're seeing, and related to this panel and the work you're doing on NPR, we've got to expose this, because this is a disgrace. This is a human rights nightmare that's going on not in Russia or China, but in our state. It's terrible for society, because and this woman, Dr. Whitney Lewis, testified that the inmates were treated so badly, and she was still in touch with some inmates after they got out because she was actually a good prison staff who was a mentor to these women. And she said, "Oh, this woman, she's now who is in the prison is now in an abusive relationship, and she thinks that's okay because she learned in her time in prison that it's just natural for her to be treated like dirt because they treat the inmates," she said, literally like a piece of dirt, and that is not what a prison is for. If somebody's committed a crime, they should be incarcerated and have an opportunity to maybe learn from their mistakes, get some education. They're not supposed to be treated like animals. And the Humphrey hearing showed that, in fact, they're being treated like animals. They're placed in cages. They're being deprived food in some cases. One guy was put out in the heat. They wouldn't let him out of his cell, so he was complaining. So they put him out in the heart of July or August, 110-degree weather. They left him out there for 3 days, and he almost died. So they're sadistic practices. And some of the good guards are being fired. So
you brought up an excellent point. That this is just like you would think that this is Russia or maybe a third world country somewhere. But this is happening here in Tulsa.
We could talk another time that the hypocrisy. The U.S. claimed, "Oh, we're going to spread human rights by going to wars, fight wars," and really there are horrific abuses here that is not going on in foreign lands, but here.
Yeah, that's very poignant points that you made, and if that doesn't make someone emotionally and charged to get involved, I don't know what is. These are some horrible stories you're sharing with us, and these horrible stories lead to trauma for a lot of the people involved, not just the children, but the people who work there. Julius, why is trauma-informed mental health care so critical in our juvenile justice system? And can you briefly explain some key principles of this approach and why they are essential for youth?
Yes, and before I do that, I want to piggyback on him
Please
real
do.
quick. I think people know. I just don't think people care. And it's psychologically, you have to understand this. Like, most people really don't care until something touches them. That's where it all hits the fan. I think that the education needs to be more on how does this affect you? Because innately, there's a percentage of the population that are just going to be selfish. They really don't understand other people's problems because they've never actually been associated. So you might not really be connected with someone who's an addict unless someone in your family becomes an addict. And then you're like, whoa, this is a problem. It's primarily what happened, with the country when the crack epidemic happened. But then now it's the opioid. Now it's hitting other cultures. Now it's a bigger problem, right? So I think that there's going to be a certain percentage of the population that's going to say, man, look at all this bad stuff that's happening. And there's going to be a population that's going to be like, well, they're in prison. And they don't understand that the outcome of that is when you go out one day, that person's going to be released. At some point, that person will be released. And you had a person who was healthy. Then you have the economic impact. Because now you have someone, like you said, I really don't believe with all the technology we have, ChatGPT, everything we have, that you should put violent people with nonviolent people. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you do that? What did they do to be put in an environment where they're going to be beat, raped, or killed? And that's part, I watched the video, the video they have before people come in, like, hey, you could be raped. You need to protect yourself. It's like, how? I'm not a violent person. I'm not an aggressive person. Why am I needing to do this? But you put them next to the person who murdered. I think that a good example, like Tory Lanez, I know this is I'm just using it so I can use a big example, but he's in there for, he's never really been in jail before. But he gets stabbed 14 times. He's not a violent person. He's not stabbing people 14 times, but he was a person who had access, who was connected to someone right there who was in there for multiple murders right next to him. See, that's an issue. So moving forward, that was just me jumping on for that.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think we need to think about alternative to incarceration since the carceral system is failing. I think a huge number of inmates don't belong in prison in the first place. They need help, or I think there are
maybe
many
even home
alternatives.
imprisonment. Like Put some on their legs and let them work.
Yeah, I think there are only a small number of offenders who are really a danger to society. So I think as far as solutions, we need to try and open a broader conversation of alternatives. And in a conservative state, the issue that, look, we can save the state a lot of money by not incarcerating these people and by putting them in a job training program or something, developing some concrete ideas of how we can save the state a huge amount of money and how this will be beneficial. And that way you can get a big coalition together that includes conservatives in the conservative state.
Right, and make a lot of money. Now, as far as trauma is concerned, all right, so we actually have a studio audience now, so I'll ask the studio audience. Does anyone know what the subconscious and conscious state is? What it means to be subconscious and conscious? Anybody here? Raise your hand. Okay. So you do. Yes, Miss Crosby. Pastor. Apostle, I'm sorry. So we have subconscious and conscious states. Subconscious, sub means under, is what you're doing when you don't think about it. Conscious is what you know you're doing. Well, if I was to ask anyone what percentage of what you're doing is subconscious and what percentage are you doing is conscious? If it could either be 50-50, 40, whatever, 60-40, what do you think? Does
80-20, conscious, subconscious.
What do you think?
I'm not sure.
It's around 85 to 90% is completely subconscious. So when you subject people to trauma, right? You're basically uploading things, especially if it happened at a young age, like the young lady, into a subconscious state where there's three things they're going to do whenever they get aroused to that level. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And that lies inside of their amygdala and other parts of their brain. If you ever been in an argument with someone, they're not listening to you. Once y'all start arguing, nobody's listening, and neither are you. You know what I'm saying? You're either to fight, flight, or freeze. So when we understand this, we need to understand, okay, there's traumatized people that are literally living in a state where when they get traumatized, they end up doing actions, and then they keep doing those actions every time. And if you talk to them when they're logical, they'll look at you and be like, oh, everything's cool. As soon as they hit that level, they have to go. Well, if you're in prison and you are in a violent scenario, you actually have to learn how to go to that state all the time in order for you to survive. So this issue turns into, okay, that person, now they come out. Well, they have what? Children. And they teach that to their children. The children scream or whatever. They're going to that state to make sure they calm down. And you can see it a lot. You can just see it walking around. People will be flipping out on their kids. And then those kids learn that. And so you have this thing and it gets locked into a place called the hippocampus that stores memories. And you have memories that get stored that trigger us, and they trigger them, and it's fight, flight, or freeze. This is detrimental because it takes so much effort to unlearn those things because they're not conscious. So you have a system that's literally making new memories, causing trauma, making people flip out. And when you ask people why they do it, a lot of times they'll just be like, this is all I know. And it's because literally that's how they know how to react. It's sometimes not even on purpose. It's just that's the way they've been conditioned. And the problem with our system is we're conditioning people to be this way, then getting mad at them about their conditioning, then putting them back in the condition, then giving them no help, and then also blaming them while there's another group of people that are financially making money and they're smart enough to understand what's happening because they have really smart people around them. They just don't care. And so they'll go to the society and use PR, public relations, to talk the groups, everyone out here, oh, this unsafe, and trigger their trauma. You guys want to be safe, right? We need to put these people in jail. They need to go forever. They'll be out. And who are they going to harm mostly? The majority of the population, not the politicians or people who have guards and all the safeties around them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the neoconservative efforts to privatize
over
prison
20%
system,
of the
our correction
prisons are
system.
actually privatized. And I don't think that most people actually know. I'm not saying this is like a personal vendetta on any politician, or I don't think that most people really truly understand, because you have, I think, a percentage of people who really do understand. And then most people are just going off of their feelings. And that, once again, is the subconscious. Their feelings are being triggered. And that's why we're in the state that we're in now, while other people are actually making money off of other people's feelings.
Yeah,
I wanted
that's
to add to
profound.
that. It's really easy. Well, the argument I hear from a lot of people is that, these people did bad things. They should be away. Why should I not get free education, but these people should? Why should I not get job training and people in prison should? From the fiscal point, by teaching them, by giving prisoners job training, emotional therapy, psychological drugs, all the things we're talking about, you're creating a person that when they leave won't need government money to be a productive community member. So it's easy to say, you guys only care about the prisoners. You don't care about the victims and the people that were perpetrated against, when in fact we do. We're trying to stop that person from going out and recidivizing, right? We're trying to stop the person who's incarcerated from going out and committing more crimes against more innocent people. And you do that by treating the prisoner like a human and giving them the skills they need to survive and thrive, so that they don't go out and make more victims. So while it's easy to say, they don't deserve this, these prisoners, they don't deserve the things, why don't I get that? The question I ask is why would you want someone to come out the same way they went in? And to say just lock them up for life, I think that's a complete lack of empathy.
Who are the people who are going to probably be victimized more likely? Is it probably going to be the guy who owns the prison that's living in a super nice neighborhood? Or is it going to be middle class and below that's going to be the victim? So it's one of those things I don't think that's touching them as much. And when it does touch them, it's big news.
And we do treat white collar criminals much differently than we treat blue collar crime or street crime.
They wrote the laws.
Even though white collar crime is responsible for orders of magnitude more fiscal damage and more damage as regards to suicide, spousal abuse, stuff like that. Wage theft is the biggest theft committed in the U.S. by a huge margin, and no one goes to jail for that.
Milton, my next question's for you. What key differences have you noticed in the resources, support systems, and overall educational philosophies between the juvenile justice facility you worked in and Tulsa Public Schools?
Resources. What resources? No. As with any education setting, you got a desk, you got kid desk, had a TV screen, a monitor, computer, and that was pretty much it. Go for it. I couldn't put stuff on the wall because you couldn't use adhesive. You couldn't use sticky putty because, they might take it off, jam it into the locks. Couldn't use thumbtacks, There were a lot of things. Of course, we could get paper. We had access to a printer and copier. But like I said before, the question was, even pencils, right? We were supplied pencils. We always had to take the eraser part off and the metal part off, and it was they were numbered. They would put paper and number around each pencil. So a lot of things that we did in class was heavily watched. You didn't want things to come up missing, right? We did have a phenomenal teacher there in science, and he would do more hands-on things in hopes of nothing coming up missing. Unfortunately, things did, which kind of hurts the program, but we tried. A lot of times we could show things on YouTube and get our message across of what we wanted to, deliver to them and have them understand. It's just, I feel bad because where I'm at now, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And you're kind of catching kids further upstream with an alternative program. Kids don't feel like traditional schools for them, or they're part of the community, or they're part of a bad situation at a previous school, or where they didn't go to school, right? Now we're able to give them hope, and by letting them know the world is our classroom, which is Street School's motto, exposure is everything. Exposure is everything. I fill up a little bus with kids and take them to different places, and we're able to do more than just the zoo. Like, I took them on Greenwood one day and they had no clue. So I was able to take them to Fulton and they could talk to the owner. And she just poured life into them. And it was so amazing to hear them actually interact and ask questions. Took them to Greenwood Cultural Center. Terrence Crutcher Foundation was there, and they were able to talk and give them an explanation of why their foundation exists. So we have so many untapped resources in Tulsa that we just need the opportunity to bring into juvenile detention centers. Like I was saying before, there's so many nonprofits that want to work and help. It's just people needing the understanding of how to get through the red tape, and people wanting to stand up and say, let's make a difference. I can see so much happening on both issues, on both sides, whether you're working inside juvenile or traditional school or non-traditional. I wish equity was more of a conversation that we could, dive into, because some people need more help than others. Some schools need more help than others, and especially when we're talking about Passion of Mind, North Tulsa, we know that there's a lot of great things happening at different schools that need to be celebrated. And there's a lot of things that just need to be supported as well. And I love the idea of people who want to help will find a way to help. I'm surrounded by great gentlemen, and I'm learning more about what they do and, why they're passionate about what they're passionate about. And we could sit here and do this for 5 hours, and I'm pretty sure we would still have stories about the impact we've made or we're trying to do. I love to keep it positive. Like, I see Tulsa excelling. I really, truly do. Especially, with the light of, hey, we got our first black mayor, right? Hopefully. And he visited Street School. That was the coolest part. Like, he came and he was making time to be able to say, I'm here, I'm present, and I want to support in different ways people that need support. And sometimes your words are the biggest sign of support, your kindness. And we just appreciate anybody and anything anybody wants to offer, any time, talent, and treasures. Come, help, support. Get out here, help kids. They're our future.
Thank you. Bracken, you've got an interesting experience as well. You've worked in a psych ward, and you've worked at one of the most expensive private schools in the state of Oklahoma. Can you talk about the differences between how the children are supported with their psychological and emotional needs between these two environments?
The school, like, one's a school and one's not, right? I think the focus in a school is education, and especially at like a place like Holland Hall, the focus is on college preparedness. And I'm not saying that like a juvenile detention center shouldn't be, but that is definitely not the way we think about that in Oklahoma. Like, by and large, our government system doesn't think about juvenile detention as like a place for education. when I worked at Shadow Mountain, the juvenile detention center, there was like school was irregular and it was short, and there wasn't much emphasis placed on it. There wasn't much time given for homework. So again, like, you're setting these kids up for a continuation of the behavior they came in with. And that is, I think you're doing a disservice to the victims that they victimized. You're doing a disservice to the students or the people in the juvenile detention center, and you're doing a disservice to people they meet later on. So were a juvenile detention center run more like a school and less like a corporate business, I think we'd all be better off. I think the students would be, when released out into the world again, able to get a job. Like, if you're setting kids up for college, career, and or life, right? Like, not everybody's going to go to college. Not everybody has to. Trade schools are great. TCC is great. A trade, like an apprenticeship, is great. Or a stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad, that's great too. If we're treating people and getting them ready for college, career, or life, we're setting them up for success. We're reducing the amount of victims. Probably we could even be putting a stop to any more victimization these people would create when they leave. Versus a school, it's sort of ideas to prepare you for college. A lot of schools prepare you for college, career, or life. Like TPS, that's the motto when I was there, was college, career, or life. Knowing that not everybody needs to go to college or wants to. Trade schools are fine, and also, stay-at-home parenting is fine as well. But the skills that we were teaching, and this is true at like any school I've taught at, are empathy, creativity, 21st century skills, right? Like, we know that around 80 to 90% of the jobs students have that are in school now when they're mid-career professionals don't exist yet. So how do you train them for that? You can't. You have to train them to be lifelong learners, to be curious, to be empathetic, to be creative. And education is changing in that way. But juvenile detention and detention in general is still stuck in this like puritanical, like, lock away, punish, and then when you're out, hopefully you don't like the punishment so much you're gonna straighten up and fly right. Even though a lot of the people in there have never seen an example of what it means to straighten up and fly right. So without training or like educating people on how to be a good community member, how to be an empathetic friend, child, parent, cousin, auntie, uncle, co-worker, whatever it is, without that emotional intelligence, without that a job skill, you're condemning them to the behavior they came in with. And school aims to take you as you enter and turn you into a young adult, prepared for the world, whatever that might be, right? For success. And that's not the case that I've come across in any of the justice, incarceration, detention centers I've reported on, worked at, read about. I mean, there are a few examples of places that are doing it right, but by and large, restorative justice doesn't exist. Preparing incarcerated people for life outside of incarceration, showing them an example that's not the example that's set them on the path to where they're at, showing them a different alternative, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, thank you. Jeremy, you've also done some reporting, and a lot of your reporting involves accountability. So as a storyteller, through both journalism and historical analysis, how do you believe the stories of these vulnerable youth can be most effectively communicated for deeper understanding that can inspire action in Tulsa?
Well, that's a good question. I think, more of their story would have to be told. I think what he's saying is very important. And I think, perhaps, if more can tell their story and speak out against the problem with the system, I think, coming from somebody who's experienced it, if they can get a voice. The problem is, their voice is not often heard. They're labeled as delinquents, so nobody wants to hear their perspective. They're treated more in a kind of human fashion. And I think it's the same thing like with the prisoners, is that they're just written off as bad people, so their voices are discounted. I mean, we do have some eloquent writers, who've exposed the dehumanizing nature of the prison system, who've got a platform. People like Mumia Abu-Jabal, became a bestseller. His books are very powerful in exposing that dehumanizing nature of the system. And he was a victim of a great injustice. He was set up for a crime because of his political activism. That model of writing, I think, is very powerful. And I think the program that you guys are running, to get, because my sister is a social worker, and she was involved with a program in Montreal, Canada, called Leave Out Violence, where they work with youth who've been through the juvenile system or have had difficult background to express themselves creatively by producing artwork, writing, poetry, journalistic writing. So I think to get them to be able to express themselves and their feeling or their experiences, and then to market the product of that, I think is important. I think that's a very good model. You have a program that can help a lot of kids, to channel whatever anger they've had or abuses or trauma into something creative and develop their writing skills. And she's also worked with them in film, and because she also had a background in film, so they produced some short films with the students. And they chronicled some of the abuses in the foster care and in the system. And I think that's a very effective way of getting the message out, because it gives the voice of these young people. They've been trained to kind of express themselves or to make these short films, or whether it's journalistic writing or film. And then they're kind of humanized. And then that can have a big impact on people in seeing some of the problem that are being described. So I think that's just one idea. And one model maybe of an NGO that is a very good model. It was called Leave Out Violence. She doesn't work for them anymore, but she worked for that organization for about 10 years. So.
As we get close to the end of our time, is there anything that needs to be said that hasn't been said yet? Milton, please.
Okay. Well, that just got me to thinking, because we don't take time to listen to other people's story, not near enough. I mean, I would propose bringing some kids up to this platform. Like I could reach out to some kids that I know who have been involved in juvenile justice and listen to them. Like, while you're there, the whole thing is don't talk about your crime, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. But they do have a story to tell, and a lot of them just need to be heard. And so that's an interesting point, because nobody takes time to do a root cause analysis why you shot such and such. We see the stories, we hear it. And even a few years ago, the student that committed that crime, it was wild to me, because here I am, I heard it, and I see the kid, and I'm like, I know what he did, but here he is. Mr. Dean, is that you? And I'm like, how in the world? Well, I had taught him in the 7th grade, and now he's supposed to be in high school, but he's out here doing things that he knows is not right. And I'm like, it threw me off, because everybody's supposed to go by your first name while you're there. But everybody knows now my first and last name. It's supposed to be for security, but I came a little bit too close to being in the classroom in other schools that my former students would come to juvenile. And so I didn't mind. I mean, but it was just one of those things where I see kids I've worked with before, and they've gone this left turn. They might have been a little rambunctious in school, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, but now they're in here with hardened criminals. And it's the hardest thing to comprehend. We had kids literally, they did a stupid Friday the 13th prank. They were talking about they were going to do this and do that at school, and they mentioned guns. Oh, that's serious, right? So whatever chat or whatever they were using, it got picked up, and they were took to detention. And it was like, man, and it was in Osage County, so their court was actually in Tulsa. And so we're holding these kids off of what they did in media, like what they chatted about. And they were all sorry, but now they've taken 2 weeks out of their lives to learn a very hard lesson. I like the guy was saying, man, I would want them to have different outlets just to be able to talk and communicate freely and get what's in their mind out.
Shameless plug, we do have a program called Teen Talk, just like this. We have young people come and have conversations like this on a panel forum. We should collaborate on getting some students who have experienced this system. Please.
Real quick, I just think more emphasis needs to be put on personal relationship.
Okay.
I know we can do like a lot of
Microphone,
talking,
please.
but really I'm sorry. I know we can do more emphasis needs to be put onto personal relationship. We can do a lot of talking, but I'm gonna say what everybody usually says: no one's coming to save us. There's lobbyists, legal people, legally bribing people to make sure these things happen. So as people, we need to develop the programs for our own communities to go in and help people in 4 ways: mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. You need all those. If you're mentally right, financially, you need to learn financial literacy so you don't feel like going out there doing something stupid. Spiritually, if you have a relationship with God, mentally, physically, and physically, because if you're not eating the right things, if you're not taking care of your body, that also leads to other issues in life as well. And I think that if we take more of an initiative to go out into the community and have these personal relationships, just like him, I had a guy I saw at church who was a Job Corps, and it'll be people that you don't necessarily know if they're going to do well or not do well. And it'll be some of the ones that you think are going to do well will do well. Some of them won't. But some of the ones you thought were going to do terrible, they'll come back to you and say, what? Man, I'm so glad you held me up right then. I remember you were a positive person in my life, and that really got me through this time. And that's what really makes the difference, is those connections you have with people, and those people are going to be the ones to go back in the neighborhoods and change other people's in their lives.
I think it's like you could be what you can see, right? And if kids don't have exposure to anything other than like a parent that's been incarcerated and hasn't been rehabilitated or is still in the same bad behaviors, and that's their life, that's what they see, that's what they learn, that's how they act. So when we have the opportunity, when kids are either in school or if they've gone far enough in detention centers, we need to expose them and like help them see something else so they can be something else. And the other thing that's said is like people like this was a big deal back in Colin Powell's day, is like he's a rose that grew through the cracks of the concrete. If we know what makes roses grow, why are we not making more cracks or just destroying the concrete? Why are we forcing people in certain situations to grow through the crack of a concrete? We know what works. We're just refusing to do it. Why are we holding up these examples, people that did these great things, and not applying what helped them get there to everybody in that situation? That is I think prevention. That's one of the keys of prevention, is like democratizing opportunity, democratizing information, democratizing all of these things that helped people like Colin Powell escape their circumstances or escape the neighborhoods they were growing up in. We don't need to force people to be roses growing through the cracks. We can help people just flourish and grow where they're at. We should I think a great idea would be stop spending so much money on over-policing these neighborhoods and spend more money helping these people, helping the students, the kids, get out of those circumstances, educating them.
Democratizing opportunity. I'm going to write that one down. Jeremy, any last words?
Well, I guess I'll leave it to the others if they want.
Well, let's take a moment. Milton, you want to say something, please?
I mean, I was going to piggyback off what these guys said. There's a lot of organizations that are doing work where they are prioritizing financial growth and stability and mental health. One organization that I've been a part of was MetCare's Foundation. Brought you in, did a panel speak as well. And the idea is, what ideas and solutions can you come up with? We're going to teach you about the different things that need help. We're going to teach you about policy. We're going to teach you about education. We're going to teach you about housing. And it was a 8-week fellowship. And I've done it twice now. And it's amazing to know that there's other people in the community that really want to help and are just not aware or not sure how. Funding is always the biggest question. But I feel like if we start doing a little bit more cooperative economics and bringing in together the resources that we do have and we do have access to, we can get a lot more work done. Just like Julius was saying, though, the personal conversations, the relationship building, it has to be there. We have to be able to, go out there, not be afraid to talk, kind of get in people's business, but to let them know it's for a reason, right? We're trying to help you and support you. I don't necessarily want to know how much you make now just to be nosy, but I want you to know there's another opportunity. If you take this opportunity, you can increase your finances, which will increase you economically and your mobility to be able to do more and have a better lifestyle for yourself and your future. I love the idea that there are so many nonprofits in Tulsa. I feel like a lot of them are doing the same work. And I would really want to be the person that ties them up, like ties the loose ends together. And I could see us working together more to get so much more accomplished. And we wouldn't have a lot of these issues because the lack of resources is why these students are doing a lot of these things, and it's unfortunate, but that's the reality. And he said it before, most of the crimes are going to be money related. It's a lack of resources. All right. And if we find a way to educate and let people know, hey, I'm here to help you. And this is another way, another avenue. We have different places that do mentoring, 100 Black Men Champs. There's so many organizations and they're pulling their resources and they're starting to bring people together. We can just do a better, we can make a better effort if we intentionally go out and start working together.
Yeah, as Julia said earlier, we are navigating a capitalistic society, so we need to operate as such. And I appreciate those comments. And this has been a very dynamic conversation. I've enjoyed it. And now this is an opportunity to open up questions to our audience. Jamie, did you have one for us?
I do have one. Julius, you mentioned the fact that not a lot of people care about something until that something happens to them. How can we as a society teach empathy or I guess besides leading by example, or are we just waiting for everybody to be traumatized in some manner?
This is going to be I can make it simple. So the easiest way to create empathy is through relationships. So I can never think that all white people are bad if I have white friends. I can never think black people are all bad if I have black friends, or at least I do that. And the easiest way to do this, I hope someone out there actually does this. They should just have a thing where they invite people to dinner, like a program where people go to dinner. Dinner and church are usually the most intimate spaces. But if you eat dinner with someone, usually because it's emotional, you're enjoying the food, you actually get to understand that person, and you can't come up with these ideas that usually are fed to you through, life. So if you were raised in a certain area and someone told you, oh, Mexicans are like this, well, you really didn't have a bunch of Mexican friends. Or I've actually had someone say something to me, and I asked them, I said, so how many black friends you got? They're like, oh, I got one cousin. He's mixed, he's half black. And I'm like, well, you really don't have an experience to even have that perception. So I try not to have a perception on things. So to me, that's the only way. The other way is by immersing yourself in conversations And then those people who immerse themselves in the conversation having a responsibility to go out and actually communicate to their silo. So to me, if you have a relationship with someone of another culture or someone who's been in prison or someone from a different situation, you should be going back. That's, I think, our responsibility to your family or your people. And when someone says something that doesn't match those ideas, to educate them, because that way that multiplies across, because they can at least say they were told. And once you lay that seed, a lot of times it'll grow, because they'll start to see. One psychological weird thing is, if you really aren't looking for it, you won't see it. It'll be right in front of you and you just won't notice it because it's not even in your mind. It's been planted. Then you'll be like, wow, I didn't even think of that. Boom. And then you'll start seeing more.
I'd like to add to that, like reading, traveling, documentaries, like at Hall and Hall, when we had the kids watch parts of 13th, that opened up so many of their eyes. They had no idea like these historical traumas had happened to these people. Examining things like the land run, which was just like done and it was just not thought about, and then examining like what that really meant to Native Americans and freedmen and, you know, people like that. Like examining history, reading books, traveling, which is meeting people, and documentaries. I think that helps people identify and learn history of different people, and that knowledge of history, I think, builds empathy, because you can look at these situations and see how things came to be. It's not just like the people were lazy and bad. These things happened and created a situation in which we find ourselves now, and I think that also helps with building empathy.
Exposure, and as we as citizens expose ourselves, if we have families, our children are also brought up in.
You have to share.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest issue. I think some people get exposed and they know, but then they're afraid to actually share. But by sharing, even if the person doesn't hear you, they heard you enough that when they see the thing happen again, it's at least a seed in their mind that they can't say, oh, I didn't hear that. Where I think there's a lot of people that just live in a silo and they have people around them that think exactly the same way. And I have conversations with people that are friends of mine that think completely differently, but at least they know. So I come back and say, oh, you saw what happened? What do you think about that? And they'll be like, oh, well, you know, but I know that seed is in there. So you'll know everything by what? It's fruit. So at the end of the day, the fruit, if the system is working so great, why are we having these issues? The fruit will show everything. So that's how you, I think, touch more people, by making them aware so that they can see the fruit of whatever they're saying, if it's true or not.
Thank you.
We are approaching the 3:30 mark, and I want to thank all of our guests. Thank you for coming in and giving us a very dynamic conversation, profound reflections. This is Real Talk, Voices on the Margins. I'm Anthony Cherry, Jeremy Kuzmarov. We have Julius Fellows, Milton Dean III, and Bracken Clark. Thanks for joining us.
We are.